Okay, so we saw in our previous discussion that while we have some intuitive idea as to what we think is real, comparing our ideas with other people's ideas and then trying to explicitly enunciate what it is about this thing that makes it real and under what circumstances it might shift from being real to non-real suggests that our intuitive ideas probably need some honing. So in this video, we're going to look at some initial attempts to try and pin down ideas about reality, and we shall see where they go. So the three ideas we're going to look at are naturalism, materialism, and physicalism. So starting with naturalism, to take our definition from Merriam-Webster, Merriam-Webster says naturalism is a theory denying that an event or an object has supernatural significance. So naturalism is defined against supernaturalism. So as long as we can define supernaturalism, we're fine. Okay. Now, we've got a couple of ways forward for doing this. One option is we can list specific examples of natural things and list specific examples of supernatural things. And then we can try and come up with a general rule based on these lists. Another way of doing it is to start from the opposite end and to say, okay, we're going to come up with a general rule first of what our categories should be, and then we're going to be able to take our specific examples and slot them in. And in science, regularly we see science can operate in either way, and often both ways, back and forth between saying, okay, here's a general rule of what constitutes, for example, what do I mean by a mixture compared to a chemical compound. When people were trying to work out the theory of atoms and molecules, they listed specific examples and then they tried to work out what these properties that they felt should be mixtures and what ones they felt should be compounds, what they shared. And then they worked out that some of the ones didn't fit and they shuffled them back and forth. So let's try this method. This is an entirely reasonable thing to do in science. But before I get onto naturalism and supernaturalism, I'm going to try something that's maybe a little bit simpler just to get a feel of how this method works. What is part of me? Because if I can't answer the question, what's part of me, I may not get very far with answering the question, what is supernatural? So let me come up with two categories, things that are part of me and things that are part of not me. This should be really simple. I know myself well, okay? My hand, there you go, that's my hand. It's part of me, good. An Alpha Centauri, way out there somewhere, is not part of me, right? We can do this game, this is easy. Okay, and so I can come up with a rule, things that are part of my body. My hand is part of my body, Alpha Centauri is not part of my body, we're good to go. Okay, well, how about my fillings? Ha 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 ha. That was really tricky to take the picture off, just like, never mind. Is that part of me? I mean, it's a lump of metal. I'm not some mechanoid thing. I don't feel it should be part of me. But it's kind of part of my body. I mean, you know, if you were to stick a pair of pliers in there and you were to try and pull it out, I would scream. So it's part of my body. It really is attached, but it's not really part of me. You know, if it fell out, I'd throw it away and I'd not mourn it in any way, shape or form. I wasn't born with it. I may well not die with it. Okay, so new rule. Things that have my DNA. My hand has my DNA. Alpha Centauri and my fillings do not have my DNA. How about my nail clippings? They do have my DNA. But again, I don't mourn them when I throw them away. If I said, okay, I'm happy to throw away things that are part of me, then maybe my nail clippings are part of me and watch them decompose. But I feel that my nail clippings, this bit of me that I just hack off and throw away, once I've cut them off and thrown them away, they shouldn't count as part of me anymore. I don't feel slighted if someone were to go through my rubbish and steal them and take them away. I don't say, hey, that's part of me, bring it back. Okay, so how about new rule? Things that are part of my body and have my DNA. Okay, my hand is part of my body and has my DNA. My nail clippings have my DNA but aren't part of my body. My fillings are part of my body but don't have my DNA, and Alpha Centauri is none of those things. So, good. This rule works. How about my gut bacteria? Now, I'd be hard-pressed to say that my gut bacteria aren't part of me, because if I didn't have my gut bacteria, I would cease to function. I'd die in pretty short order. So that seems pretty important, and yet they don't have my DNA. So what can I say about those? Well, okay, new rule. Okay, things that are part of my body and either have my DNA or they are otherwise so integrated into me that without them I would die. Okay, though here we're going to raise a question with a question of what does it mean to have my DNA? Because how about my mitochondrial DNA? When you want to find out, when you do one of those DNA tests to find out where you came from, they can test your mitochondrial DNA. But if you look at a picture here of your mitochondrial DNA, you'll notice that normally your DNA is this long strand, but your mitochondrial DNA is ring-shaped. It's the wrong shape. Why is that? It's because at some point in your distant history, a bug got into your cells and set up home and has passed on its DNA through generation after generation after generation of cells and then generation after generation of organism, such that your mitochondrial DNA, the reason it lasts through the generations is because it's not involved in sexual reproduction. It doesn't get shuffled around, exactly because in some sense it's not quite your DNA, even though it's the thing that we use to keep track of you, to tell us who we are. So it gets complicated. Now, accepting I could play this game all day, and in fact, possibly later David might share some comments on how this is a meditation that people go through in separate contexts, unrelated to science, more related to religion. As to the fact that one can go through this all day. What do we mean by me? I don't even know what I mean by me. So what could I possibly understand about what I mean by supernatural? Well, let's try and see where we get. Okay, so what is supernatural? Let's set up two categories. This one is reasonably easy, okay, because my hand is natural and Alpha Centauri is natural, and my fillings and my nail clippings and my gut bacteria and my mitochondrial DNA, they're all natural, right? Nothing complicated going on here. Okay, so what's supernatural? Okay, gods are supernatural. That's simple enough. Miracles are supernatural by definition, right? If your miracle is natural, then it's not a miracle. It's just a thing that happens. Right, and everything else is natural. Stars, gut bacteria, nail clippings, fine. Except demons. You probably want to put demons under supernatural. Ghosts. Ghosts, they're kind of supernatural. Like, you know, they're spirits. They're yeah, I'm going to put those under supernatural. The mind. Okay, that's my spirit or something maybe, but before I'm dead. So this is my mind supernatural? A lot of people used to say, yes, it is. But now a lot of people actually say, no, we're going to put mind over on the natural side. Okay, it's something related to my brain rather than something related to my spirit. We don't have to invoke supernature to say my mind is something that my brain does. Okay. Purpose. Now, ask Aristotle, purpose was part of science. Purpose was an integral part of science, except we then realized, thanks be to the Enlightenment, that science is just mechanism of things grinding away that don't have a purpose. They have causality, has to work from past to now. You can't have something that's reaching out to the future. So the only way to have purpose is to have some supernatural calling forward rather than the natural world, which just grinds on its own way. So we haven't even tried to come up with some general categories yet, some overarching rule. We're just trying to sort things into what's supernatural and what's natural. And we're finding that actually we're shuffling them around quite a bit over time, and it turns out to not be as easy as we thought. So let's ask the question, are there any bigger rules that we can appeal to rather than just shuffling them around as seems sensible at the time? So our good friend Richard Dawkins says in The Magic of Reality, right in the first chapter, he says supernatural magic is fictional magic. He goes on to say The supernatural can never offer us a true explanation of the things we see in the world and the universe around us. Now, this is a bold statement. He's not simply saying that a supernatural explanation is not complete. He's not saying a supernatural explanation is one way of looking at it which misses out certain key aspects. He's saying it can never be true. So the argument that says God did it, or even God had a part in it, cannot be true. Why is that? Well, it's simple. It follows from what he said on page 19, namely that supernatural magic, and if you follow through the logic of what he says in the chapter as a whole, the supernatural is fictional. Supernatural things simply don't exist. So anything which invokes the supernatural necessarily invokes a fictitious thing. So this helps us with sorting between natural and supernatural. This says, okay, if anything exists, it has to go on this side of our picture. It has to be natural, because supernatural things simply don't exist. Now, okay, so we've now said, right, the mind we can put over here. The mind exists, or is something exuded by the brain. So the mind is just natural. We thought it was something supernatural and spiritual. Now we know better. But what might happen in future if, for example, we discover, in the same way as we now have a handle on the mind, what if we get a handle on the soul? What if suddenly we realize that ghosts really do exist? There really is ectoplasm out there or something. Well, then we haven't shown that the supernatural exists. We've just shown that ghosts are natural, because supernatural things don't exist. And if ghosts exist, they must be natural. Thanks be to Richard Dawkins. And then once we've found that ghosts exist, maybe we have some new particular piece of apparatus that can detect these spiritual beings, where spiritual things are natural because they exist. And we say, oh, look, there are lots of spiritual beings. Maybe demons also exist, which doesn't mean that we've proved that supernatural things exist. It just means that we've shown that demons are natural. Now, this seems to be rather circular. If this is the way we're working, if we're following Richard Dawkins down this path, then to say that naturalism says that only natural things exist and have significance, well, this now becomes circular, because we're saying that only natural things exist as our starting point. So obviously, only natural things exist. We've just come up with naturalism by fiat, but we haven't then said anything interesting, because we haven't said that gods don't exist. We've simply said that if gods do exist, they'd be natural. So let's move on to something that might be a little less circular in its reasoning. Okay, let's go for materialism. Now, Merriam-Webster says now, materialism is the belief that only material things exist. Awesome. So now, instead of trying to work out what natural things are, we just have to work out what material things are. Okay, so what is material? Stuff you can see. We're going to work through and we're going to try and come up with a definition. Okay, stuff you can see, like atoms. Well, I can see atoms as long as I've got lots of them together. Can you see individual atoms? No, not really. But you don't say atoms suddenly start existing when they become big enough to see. No. Okay, so this doesn't work. So let's say stuff you can hit. I can hit an atom, even if I can't see it. If I have a single atom there, I might hit it very gently. I might not feel it, but I can, in principle, hit it. It is stuff. So, okay, but then what about light? I can't hit light. So we now see this clash between stuff that I can see. The only reason I'm seeing it is because I have light. So I really want light to be a real thing, but I can't then say that material stuff is stuff that I can hit, because I can't hit light. So that seems to fall down. Okay, stuff. Right, new definition. Material is stuff, right? Light is stuff coming from a light bulb, and atoms are stuff in my pen. Stuff is what I mean by material. Okay, well, what about force? Now, again, as we saw before, in the same way as light is the thing that allows you to see something, force is the thing that allows you to hit something, right? If I have a hammer and I hit you with a hammer, the thing that hurt, I have imparted force to you. Now, if I say, oh, but force is not stuff. There's no atom of force going on, so force is not real. Do you then say that the thing that caused you the pain is not real? Or do you see that you really want force to be real as well? But for each stage, we were kind of willing to say, okay, light is material in some way, and atoms are material in some way. We can cut it that far, but force isn't material. It's not stuff. But we really want to say that force is real. It's not fictitious. It's not something we made up. It's really part of the universe. We can make physical laws about it. So here's what we do. We say, abandon materialism. Physicalism is the one that comes next. So naturalism was circular. Materialism didn't go as far as we wanted. Physicalism, maybe we'll do better. So physicalism is the thesis that the descriptive, these definitions are getting longer with every one I go through. Here, blame Merriam-Webster, not me. Okay. Physicalism is the thesis that the descriptive terms of scientific language are reducible to terms which refer to spatio-temporal things and their properties. I hope that's clear. So let's break this down a bit. Spatio-temporal things, that means space and time and mass, basically. If you look at the standard system of units, right, we have the MKS system of units, meters, kilograms, and seconds, which is to say meters is space, kilograms is mass, seconds is time. We work in MKS units because we care about spatio-temporal things, physical, real things. Okay, so now we can answer the question, is force real? Because force, well, F equals ma. Force equals mass times acceleration. Mass is mass, and acceleration is velocity divided by time. Well, time is time, good, and velocity is space divided by time. So we've shown that force can be reduced to things to do with space and time and mass. Good, force exists, we're happy. Except that's mechanical force. Now what happens if we have something like electrostatic force? Along comes Coulomb, and Coulomb says that it's related to the square of the charge divided by the square of a distance. Now space, the distance squared is obviously space squared, so we've reduced that to something spatio-temporal. Okay, but what about charge? Can we reduce charge to something described in space and time and mass? And in the very early days of electronics, people spent a lot of time trying to work out how to reduce charge to something mechanical that could be described in terms of space and time and mass. And ultimately they failed. And some people said, aha, this proves that charge does not exist. And some people said, this proves that we've missed something in just spatio-temporal things. What can we possibly... Oh, look at that. Oh, that is helpful. Okay, so properties. We've got space, time, mass, and the properties of these things. And charge is the property of an electron or whatever you have. Good. The problem is this opens up a door to all sorts of other things. So, for example, temperature is a property of a material. Luminous intensity is a property of a light bulb. Color is a property of a face mask. Right? We can go on. And each of these things, if you really want me to rant afterwards in the Q&A, just ask me what I think about temperature. But we call these real physical things. We call luminous intensity a physical thing. And historically, there were great arguments over whether or not color really was a physical thing or whether it was something that happens in your brain. And in fact, there are still arguments going on. But it gets worse than that. Once we've opened up to that, well, is purpose a property of a thing? Is happiness a property? I say this student is happy. If happiness is a property of a student, then has happiness entered the physical realm? And I can say, yes, happiness is real. Can we go further? Is soulishness the property of a student? A person has a soul, just like an electron has a charge. Once we've opened the gate to the properties of things, we seem to let everything in. So physicalism also doesn't seem to necessarily narrow down things in the way that one might want to. Or it opens up things in an incredibly general way. And then we say, well, what doesn't exist? What does this exclude at all? So, in summary then, we've looked at ways that we might try and formally pin down what is real, and particularly ways in which scientists historically have tried to pin down ideas of what is real. Naturalism turned out to be, broadly speaking, circular. Materialism turned out to exclude too much. And physicalism turns out to potentially not exclude enough. So, in the next video, we're going to look at more nuanced, subtle ways of what we might consider by realism.